Billionaire drops her wallet. What the black single dad did next changed his life. It wasn't just about the money. It was about a choice made in the pouring rain that would echo through the lives of everyone involved. She had an empire worth billions and a schedule that allowed for no mistakes. He had 3 crumpled dollar bills in his pocket, a sick daughter clinging to his hand, and no place to sleep tonight. 2 different worlds, colliding on one rainy Seattle sidewalk. Most people waste years thinking that success is just about luck or being in the right place at the right time. But there is something no one tells you about the moment that changes everything. It usually comes disguised as a test of character when no one is watching. When Vivian Hart dropped her wallet containing a small fortune, most would have taken the cash and run. Others would have handed it over for a reward. But Terrence did something that left the wealthiest woman in the city speechless, and it started a chain reaction that no one saw coming. If you have ever felt like the world is against you, or if you've been struggling to hold on to your integrity when everything is falling apart, this story is exactly for you. Stick around to find out what happened when a man with nothing gave away the only thing he found, and how it exposed a secret that threatened to destroy an entire company. The rain in Seattle didn't wash things clean. It just made the grime slicker and the cold bite harder. For Terrence, the relentless drizzle was a constant, rhythmic reminder of the roof he could no longer provide for his 7-year-old daughter, Lila. Terrence checked his watch, the leather strap cracked and peeling against his wrist. It was 11:30 a.m. He had been standing outside the tech district's high-rise offices since dawn, clutching a folder of resumes that were now damp at the edges. He was a certified structural engineer, a man who had once built bridges that spanned rivers, a man who understood the physics of tension and compression better than he understood his own bad luck. But the gap in his employment history, caused by a tragedy no one wanted to hear about, made him a liability in the eyes of every recruiter he had met this morning. He looked down at Lila. She was sitting on a dry patch of concrete under the awning of a closed newsstand, trying to make herself small against the wind. She was drawing on the back of an old flyer with a nub of a blue crayon she had saved from a diner plaque mat 3 days ago. Her coat was navy blue and quilted, but it was too small. The sleeves rode up her forearms, exposing her skin to the damp chill. She coughed then, a dry, rattling sound that made Terrence's stomach tighten into a hard knot. It wasn't just a cold. It was the mold in the cheap motel room they were staying in on the outskirts of the city. The dampness was settling in her chest, and he knew, with the terrifying precision of a parent, that if he didn't get her into a warm, dry environment soon, that cough would turn into pneumonia. They had 2 days left before the motel manager kicked them out. After that, it was the shelter, or worse, the sedan he had parked 5 blocks away, which was currently out of gas. "Daddy, I'm hungry," she whispered. She didn't look up from her drawing. She knew better than to complain loudly. She was too mature for her age, a heartbreaking side effect of watching her father count pennies for the last 18 months. "I know, baby, I know," Terrence said, his voice rough with fatigue. He put a hand in his pocket, feeling the 3 crumpled dollar bills and a handful of quarters. That was it. That was everything. He had skipped breakfast so she could have an apple and a granola bar, but that was hours ago. He needed a miracle, but right now he would settle for a job that paid minimum wage. Just then, the traffic on the streets seemed to part. A sleek obsidian black sedan pulled up to the curb a few yards away. It looked like a shark swimming through a school of minnows. The back door opened, and a woman stepped out. She was stunning, dressed in a sharp, cream-colored business suit that probably cost more than Terrence had made in the last 2 years combined. She held a phone to her ear, her expression tight with stress, balancing a steaming coffee cup and a textured leather clutch under her arm. This was Vivian Hart. Even Terrence, who had been disconnected from the business world while caring for his dying wife, recognized her. She was the CEO of Hart Global, a real estate and logistics empire that reshaped skylines. She was in her early 30s, known for being ruthless in the boardroom and icy to the press. "I don't care what the board says," Vivian snapped into her phone, her voice carrying over the sound of the rain. "If the merger numbers don't align by noon, pull the plug. I'm not signing off on a sinking ship just to save face." She hurried toward the revolving doors of the shimmering glass tower, her heels clicking rhythmically on the wet pavement. She was a woman moving at 1,000 miles an hour, her mind consumed by millions of dollars and thousands of employees. As she shifted her grip to check her diamond-encrusted watch, disaster struck, but silently. Her textured designer wallet slipped from under her arm. It hit the wet concrete with a soft, heavy thud, masked by the sound of passing tires and the rain hitting the awning. Vivian didn't notice. She kept walking, her head down, marching toward the warmth of her ivory tower. The revolving door spun, swallowing her whole, and she was gone. Terrence froze. He watched the wallet sit there, alone on the sidewalk, getting darker as the raindrops hit the expensive leather. A heavy silence seemed to descend on the street, drowning out the traffic. He looked around. No one else had seen it. The doorman was busy struggling with a cart of luggage on the other side of the entrance. Passers-by were buried deep in their umbrellas, rushing to get out of the storm. Terrence walked over. His boots, worn thin on the soles, made no sound. He bent down and picked it up. It was heavy, thick. His heart hammered against his ribs like a trapped bird. He opened it slightly, shielding it from the rain with his body. His breath hitched in his throat. Inside, there was a stack of $100 bills, crisp, fresh bills. He quickly estimated the thickness. At least $2,000, maybe $3,000. Beside the cash were black credit cards, the kind that didn't have limits. Time seemed to warp. The world narrowed down to that brick of cash in his hand. $3,000. That was months of rent at a decent apartment, one with heating and without mold. That was a warm new coat for Lila. That was a visit to a specialist for her lungs. That was food, real food, hot roast chicken and vegetables, for weeks. He looked at the revolving doors where Vivian had vanished. She was a billionaire. She wouldn't even miss this cash. To her, this was a rounding error. To her, this was lunch money. To him, it was life. It was survival. He looked back at Lila. She was watching him now, her big brown eyes filled with curiosity. She had stopped drawing. "What is it, Daddy?" she asked, her voice small. Terrence looked at the cash, then at his daughter. He remembered the nights he held her when she cried for her mother. He remembered the promise he made to his late wife, Alicia, in that sterile hospital room before the brain aneurysm took her so suddenly. "I will raise her right, Alicia. I will make you proud. I won't let the world break us." If he kept this, he would feed Lila's body, but he would poison her spirit. He was all she had to look up to. If he showed her that theft was the answer to hardship, he would be stealing something far more valuable than money from her. He would be stealing her moral compass. He closed the wallet. The snap of the leather sounded like a gunshot in his ears. The decision physically hurt. It was a sharp pang of loss for what could have been. But his conscience was louder than his hunger. "Pack up your crayons, Lila," Terrence said, his voice steady, though his hands were trembling slightly. "We have to go inside." Lila stood up, clutching her flyer. "Are we allowed?" she asked, fearful. They had been chased out of lobbies before. They had been looked at like trash, like they didn't belong in the spaces where the floors were marble and the air smelled of lavender. "For this, yes," Terrence said. "We are going to do the right thing." He took her small, cold hand in his and walked toward the entrance. The automatic doors slid open, and a blast of warm air hit them. It smelled of expensive coffee and floor polish. As soon as he stepped onto the gold-accented carpet, the atmosphere shifted. The warmth of the room didn't extend to the people. The security guard, a burly man named Miller with a buzz cut and a uniform that strained at the buttons, stepped forward immediately. He didn't see a man returning property. He saw a threat. He saw a tall black man in a frayed suit that was 10 years out of style, holding the hand of a child in worn-out clothes.
"Sir, stop right there," Miller said, his voice booming across the quiet lobby. His hand rested instinctively on his belt. "You can't be in here. Public shelter is 3 blocks east. This is a private corporate building."
Terrence stopped. He didn't flinch. He didn't look down. He squeezed Lila's hand gently to let her know she was safe. "I'm not looking for a shelter," Terrence said, standing to his full height. He possessed a dignity that poverty hadn't managed to strip away. He held up the wallet. "Miss Hart dropped this outside. I need to return it to her." Miller narrowed his eyes. He looked at the wallet, then back at Terrence's face. A sneer touched his lips. "Right, you just found it," Terrence said, stepping closer, invading Terrence's personal space. "I'll take it. I'll make sure she gets it. You can go." Terrence gripped the wallet tighter. He knew how the world worked. If he handed this over to a man like Miller, half the cash might disappear before it reached the penthouse, and Terrence would never be mentioned. Or worse, Miller would claim he found it himself to get in good with the boss. "No," Terrence said, firmly. His voice was calm, but it carried the weight of iron. "I will hand it to her personally, or I will wait right here until she comes back down." Miller's face turned red. "Listen, pal, don't make this difficult. Hand it over, or I'm calling the police for trespassing. You really want your kid to see you get put in cuffs over a wallet you probably swiped?" Lila whimpered, pressing her face into Terrence's leg. Terrence felt a surge of protective anger, but he kept it locked down. He knew that if he raised his voice, he would lose. "I didn't swipe anything," Terrence said. "Call her assistant. Tell them a man named Terrence is downstairs with her clutch. If I'm lying, you can arrest me. But if you throw me out and she finds out you blocked the return of her property, how is that going to look for you?" Miller hesitated. He looked ready to escalate the situation, his pride wounded. Just then, the elevator chimed. The doors slid open, and a frantic young woman with a headset and a tablet came running out. It was Vivian's executive assistant. She looked like she was on the verge of a panic attack. "Security! Miller!" she shouted. "Miss Hart is missing her wallet. She thinks it was stolen between the car and the—" "Oh!" The assistant stopped dead in her tracks. She saw the scene. The imposing guard, the man in the wet coat, and the textured leather clutch in his hand. Terrence held it out slightly. "Is this it?" The assistant didn't wait for Miller's permission. She rushed over. "Oh, thank heavens! She's tearing the office apart. It has her ID, her cards, everything for the merger meeting." She looked at Terrence, really seeing him for the first time. "Did you find it?" It fell when she got out of the car. "Please," the assistant said, breathless. "Please come with me. She needs to see this." Miller stepped back, scowling, but he couldn't stop them now. Terrence looked down at Lila. "Come on, sweetheart. We're going up." The elevator ride was silent and fast. They shot up 40 floors in seconds. When the doors opened, they weren't in a hallway. They were in a foyer that overlooked the entire city of Seattle. The carpet was so thick it felt like walking on clouds. Vivian Hart sat behind a desk made of glass and steel. She wasn't on the phone anymore. She was rummaging through a briefcase, looking furious. When she saw the assistant enter with Terrence and Lila, she stopped. "I found him in the lobby, Miss Hart," the assistant said. "He brought it back." Vivian stood up. She walked around the desk, her eyes locked on Terrence. She took the wallet from him, her movements sharp. She opened it. She counted the cash quickly. She checked the cards. She looked up, her expression softening into confusion. "It's all here." "Of course it is," Terrence said. "Why?" Vivian asked. She leaned back against her desk, her guard dropping for the first time that morning. "My assistant told me security tried to turn you away. You could have walked off with $3,000. I would have canceled the cards, sure, but the cash, that's untraceable. You could have been miles away by now." Terrence looked at the panoramic view of the rainy city, then back at the woman who owned it. "I have a daughter," Terrence said, gesturing to Lila, who was mesmerized by a large abstract painting on the wall. "I'm trying to teach her that doing the right thing matters, even when it's raining, even when you're hungry, even when no one is watching." Vivian looked at Lila. She saw the fraying on the little girl's cuffs. She saw the hollow look in Terrence's cheeks. She saw the resume folder he was still clutching in his other hand. "You're looking for work?" she asked, pointing to the folder. "Yes, ma'am," Terrence said. "Structural engineering. But it's been a hard year. May I?" She held out her hand. Terrence handed her his resume. It was damp, but legible. She scanned it, her eyes moving fast. Her eyebrows lifted. "You worked on the West End Bridge project?" she asked, surprised. "You were a lead on the foundation team?" "Until my wife passed," Terrence said quietly. The room went still. "She had a brain aneurysm. It was sudden. I took 18 months off to care for Lila and handle the estate. But the medical bills, they took everything else. When I tried to go back to the firms, they saw the gap in my resume and saw a risk. We lost the house 6 months ago." Vivian went silent. She looked at the man standing before her. He wasn't asking for pity. He was stating facts. She opened her drawer and pulled out a checkbook. She scribbled something quickly and tore it off. She walked over and held it out to him. Terrence looked at it. It was a check for $10,000. The number 0 seemed to stare back at him. 10,000. That could solve everything. That was a new start. That was a car. That was an apartment deposit. He stared at it for a long moment. Then, gently, he pushed her hand back. Vivian was stunned. "Excuse me?" "I appreciate the gesture, Miss Hart, truly. That money would save my life right now. But money runs out. I'm not asking for charity. I'm asking for a chance." He tapped the resume she was holding. "I'm a good engineer. I'm a hard worker. I don't want to be paid for returning a wallet. That's something anyone should do. I want to be paid for my skill. If you want to repay me, look at that resume again. If I'm qualified, hire me. If I'm not, I'll take my daughter and go." Vivian stared at him. The silence in the room was heavy, but it wasn't tense anymore. It was respectful. She looked at the check in her hand, then at Terrence. She slowly ripped the check into pieces and dropped it into the waste bin. "You're right," she said. A small smile touched her lips. She pressed a button on her intercom. "Send in the director of facilities immediately and get me the blueprints for the shipping district warehouse." She looked at Terrence. "My facilities director has been complaining for months that our new warehouse foundations in the shipping district are sinking. He says it's the rain. I say it's bad planning. He can't find a specialist who understands the soil composition down there. You worked on the West End Bridge. That's the same soil shelf." "It's glacial till," said Terrence immediately, his eyes lighting up. "It's unstable when wet, but if you drive micropiles 40 feet down to the bedrock instead of using spread footings, it holds." Vivian slammed her hand on the desk, grinning. "Exactly. I've been telling them that for weeks." She walked over to him and extended her hand. "The starting salary is $85,000 a year. Full benefits, starting immediately. But there's a condition." Terrence held his breath. He shook her hand. "What is it?" "We have corporate housing for senior staff, an apartment complex near the site. It's currently empty, and I hate wasted assets. You move in today. I don't want my lead foundation engineer worrying about where his daughter is sleeping while he's inspecting my buildings." Tears pricked Terrence's eyes. He fought them back, nodding slowly. The relief washed over him like a warm wave, almost making his knees buckle. "I can do that," he whispered. Vivian knelt down so she was eye level with Lila. She reached into a crystal bowl on her desk and handed the little girl a gold-wrapped gourmet chocolate. "Your dad is a good man," she told the child. "I know," Lila said, smiling for the first time that day. Terrence didn't just get a job that day, he got his dignity back. But as he would soon find out, getting the job was the easy part. Keeping it in a world filled with jealousy and sabotage would be the real battle. Terrence just turned down $10,000 because he believed in his own value. He chose dignity over easy money. If you would have done the same, or if you're rooting for Terrence to win, please hit that like button right now. It helps us share these stories with more people who need hope. Now, let's see what happened when Terrence walked onto the job site and walked straight into a trap. The corporate apartment was nicer than any home Terrence had ever owned, even before the tragedy. It had 2 bedrooms, a view of the bay, and a kitchen stocked with food.
That first night, after Lila had taken a long, hot bath and eaten a real dinner, she fell asleep in a bed with clean, crisp sheets. Terrence stood in the doorway, watching her chest rise and fall. No coughing. The air was dry and warm. He went into the bathroom, turned on the shower to mask the sound, and sat on the edge of the tub. He wept. He cried for the wife he missed, for the fear he had carried for 2 years, and for the relief that had finally come. But the peace was short-lived. The next morning, Terrence arrived at the Hart Global construction site in the shipping district. He was wearing a new hard hat and a safety vest, ready to work. Vivian had sent a memo announcing his hiring, but she wasn't there. She was back in the tower, handling her merger. On the ground, things were different. Terrence was introduced to Gorski, the site foreman. Gorski was a massive man with a red face and hands like shovels. He had been with the company for 15 years, and he ran his site like a dictator. When Terrence walked up, Gorski didn't offer a handshake. He spat on the ground and looked Terrence up and down. "So," Gorski grunted, his voice like gravel, "you're the special consultant the boss sent down, the one she found on the street." News traveled fast. "I'm the lead foundation engineer, Terrence," said calmly, extending his hand. "I'm here to fix the sinking issue." Gorski ignored the hand. He stepped closer, towering over Terrence. "Let me tell you something, college boy. I've been pouring concrete since you were in diapers. I don't need some charity case coming in here telling me how to do my job just because he got lucky with a lost wallet." Terrence lowered his hand. He realized immediately that this wasn't going to be about engineering. This was going to be a war. "I'm not here to step on toes, Gorski. I'm here to make sure the building stands up." "The building is fine," Gorski snapped. "We're pouring the main foundation slabs on Friday. The schedule is tight. You stay in your trailer, review the paperwork, and sign off on it. Don't get in my way, and we won't have a problem. Capiche?" Gorski turned and walked away, barking orders at the crew. The other workers looked at Terrence with suspicion. He was the outsider, the boss's pet. Terrence took a deep breath. He could have gone to his trailer. He could have signed the papers and collected his paycheck. It would have been easy. But Terrence hadn't survived the rain to take the easy way out. Terrence watched Gorski walk away, his heavy boots sinking into the thick mud that coated the job site. The wind whipped off the Puget Sound, carrying the scent of salt and diesel fuel. Most men in Terrence's position would have done exactly what the foreman said. They would have gone to the warm trailer, signed the paperwork, and collected that $85,000 salary with a smile. After all, he had Lila to think about. He had a warm bed for the first time in years. Why rock the boat? But Terrence knew something that Gorski didn't. Soil doesn't lie. People lie. Budgets lie. But the earth always tells the truth. And if you don't listen, it will swallow you whole. Instead of going to the trailer, Terrence went to his truck and grabbed his soil probe and a set of schematics. He waited until the lunch whistle blew and the site cleared out. The rain had picked up again, turning the construction pit into a gray, churning soup. He climbed down into the excavation pit. The mud sucked at his boots with every step, trying to pull him down. He walked to the northeast corner, the spot where the heaviest load of the new warehouse would sit. According to the paperwork Gorski had filed, they had driven steel piles 60 feet down to hit the bedrock. Terrence knelt in the mud. He didn't mind the dirt. It felt honest. He inserted the probe. He checked the vibration logs on his tablet, which recorded the resistance the pile drivers had encountered. He frowned. The numbers didn't add up. If they had hit bedrock at 60 feet, the resistance graph should have spiked sharply. Instead, it was a flat line, suggesting they had stopped driving the piles at 40 feet, floating in the glacial till. It was stable enough for a few years, maybe, but once the heavy shipping containers were loaded in, the foundation would crack. The building would sink. Terrence spent the next 3 hours in the rain, checking every single pile location. By the time he climbed out of the pit, he was soaked to the bone, covered in gray sludge, but his mind was on fire. He had found the pattern. Gorski wasn't just lazy, he was skimming. By using shorter piles and less concrete, he was saving the company hundreds of thousands of dollars in materials. But that money wasn't going back to Hart Global. It was disappearing into overage costs and consulting fees from shell companies. Terrence sat in his truck, staring at the evidence on his tablet. He felt sick. If he exposed this, it was his word against a foreman who had been here for 15 years. Gorski had friends. Gorski had influence. Terrence was just the guy who returned a wallet. He looked at the picture of Lila he had taped to his dashboard. She was smiling in the photo, her cheeks finally filling out after a week of good food. If he lost this job, they were back on the street. If he spoke up, he risked everything. But then he remembered the wallet. He remembered the feeling of the leather in his hand and the choice he made. Integrity wasn't a one-time act. It was a habit. The next morning, the tension on the site was thick enough to cut with a welding torch. The heavy cement trucks were lined up at the gate, their drums turning slowly, mixing the concrete for the big pour. This was the milestone event. Vivian Hart was scheduled to arrive at noon for the ceremonial first pour. The press would be there. Terrence walked into the site trailer. Gorski was there, laughing with two of his crew members, drinking coffee. When Terrence walked in, the laughter died. Terrence didn't waste time. He threw the report on the table.
"You stopped the piles at 40 feet, Terrence said, his voice calm but loud enough to be heard over the generator outside. "The specs call for 60. You're floating the foundation, Gorski." Gorski stood up slowly. He was a head taller than Terrence and outweighed him by 50 pounds. He picked up the report and didn't even look at it. He tossed it into the trash can. "I told you to stay in your lane, charity case," Gorski growled. "The specs are guidelines. I know this ground. 40 feet is plenty." "It's plenty until it rains for a week straight and the till liquefies," Terrence shot back. "Then the northeast corner shears off and the roof collapses. I'm not signing off on this pour." Gorski laughed, a harsh barking sound. He walked around the table and got right in Terrence's face. "You think anyone cares what you sign? You're a diversity hire, Terrence, a PR stunt. Miss Hart felt sorry for a homeless guy and gave him a pity job. You think she's going to listen to you over me? I make this company millions. You returned a purse." Gorski leaned in closer, his breath smelling of stale tobacco. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to go out there, put on your shiny white helmet, and smile for the cameras. Then you're going to sign the safety release. If you don't, well, I heard they found a bottle of whiskey in your locker this morning. Drinking on the job is an immediate termination, and I'd hate for you to lose that nice apartment with your little girl inside." Terrence went cold. The threat was clear. Gorski had planted alcohol in his locker. He was ready to frame him. Terrence looked at the other men in the trailer. They looked away, unwilling to cross the boss. "You're risking people's lives for a kickback," Terrence whispered. "I'm getting the job done," Gorski said, checking his watch. "Now get out of my office. The trucks roll in 10 minutes. Terrence walked out into the drizzle. His heart was pounding. He felt trapped. If he stopped the trucks, Gorski would claim he was drunk and belligerent. Security, Miller, the same guard from the lobby, was already at the gate, chatting with Gorski's guys. They would tackle him before he could say a word. He looked at the gate. The first truck was revving its engine. He had 10 minutes to decide. Save his job and risk the building, or save the building and risk his life. At 11:55 a.m., a convoy of black SUVs rolled onto the site. The press was already set up under a white tent to shield them from the rain. Vivian Hart stepped out of the lead vehicle. She looked impeccable in a trench coat and hard hat, smiling for the cameras. This warehouse was a major victory for her, proof that she could expand the company despite the board's doubts. Gorski was there to greet her, shaking her hand vigorously, playing the part of the loyal soldier. "Everything is ready, Miss Hart, on schedule and under budget, just like you asked." "Excellent work, Gorski," Vivian said. She looked around. "Where is Terrence? I wanted to introduce him." "Oh, he's around," Gorski said, waving his hand dismissively. "I think he's feeling a bit under the weather, maybe a bit overwhelmed by the scope of the project." Vivian frowned. That didn't sound like the man who had diagnosed the soil issue in her office. "All right, let's get on with it," Vivian said. She walked toward the large lever that would signal the trucks to begin pouring. The first massive cement mixer rumbled forward, backing up toward the open pit. The backup beeper echoed loudly. Beep, beep, beep. Gorski grinned. He had won. Suddenly, a figure sprinted from behind the supply stacks. It was Terrence. He didn't run to Vivian. He ran straight into the path of the reversing cement truck. "Stop!" Terrence screamed, waving his arms. The crowd gasped. The truck driver slammed on the brakes, the tires skidding in the mud. The massive vehicle came to a halt just feet from Terrence. "What is he doing?" a reporter shouted. Cameras flashed wildly. Gorski's face turned purple. "Get him out of there! Security! He's drunk! Get him off the site!" Miller and 2 other guards rushed forward, grabbing Terrence by the arms. "Let me go!" Terrence shouted, struggling against them. "You can't pour! The foundation is compromised!" Vivian froze. Her hand hovered over the lever. She saw the desperation in Terrence's eyes. She saw the way Gorski was sweating, not from the humidity, but from fear. "Wait!" Vivian commanded. Her voice cut through the chaos like a knife. "Let him speak!" "He's intoxicated, Miss Hart," Gorski yelled, trying to block her view. "We found a bottle in his locker. He's trying to sabotage the project because I wrote him up for laziness." Vivian looked at Terrence. He was being held by 2 guards, mud splattered on his face, his vest torn, but his eyes were clear. "I'm not drunk, Vivian," Terrence said, using her first name for the first time. "I checked the piles yesterday. Gorski stopped at 40 feet. He's pocketing the difference on the steel and concrete. If you pour this foundation today, this building will collapse within 5 years, and when it does, it will kill people." The silence that followed was deafening. The only sound was the idling engine of the truck. Gorski laughed nervously. "That's insane. He's crazy. I have the logs right here." He waved a clipboard. "The logs are faked," Terrence said. He pulled his tablet from his jacket pocket. "But the sonic echo doesn't lie. I ran a sonic test on the northeast corner piles. Look at the data." He held the tablet out. Vivian walked over. The mud ruined her expensive shoes, but she didn't care. She took the tablet. She looked at the graph Terrence had generated. She wasn't an engineer, but she knew how to read a lie. She turned to Gorski. "Bring me the core sample drill." Gorski went pale. "Miss Hart, we don't have time for—" "Bring it!" she screamed. A hush fell over the site. A technician ran to fetch the portable drill used for testing concrete depth. "Drill right here," Vivian ordered, pointing to the spot Terrence had indicated. "If there is bedrock at 60 feet, we'll hit it. If there isn't—" She let the sentence hang in the air. The technician set up the drill. The whine of the motor filled the air. Down it went. 10 feet, 20, 30, 40. At 42 feet, the drill slipped. It sped up. It was churning through soft mud. "It's soft, ma'am," the technician yelled. "No resistance." Vivian looked at the drill, then at Gorski. The foreman looked like he was about to vomit. He turned to run, but Miller, realizing which way the wind was blowing, released Terrence and grabbed Gorski by the collar of his jacket. Vivian walked up to Terrence. She didn't care about the cameras. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a handkerchief, handing it to him to wipe the mud from his face. "You saved us," she said, her voice shaking slightly. "You saved the company. You saved lives." "I was just doing the job," Terrence said, straightening his vest. Vivian turned to the press, her face hard as stone. "Ladies and gentlemen, there will be no pour today. We have some internal restructuring to do, but I want you to meet the new Director of Structural Safety for Hart Global." She gestured to Terrence. "His name is Terrence, and he is the only man on this site I trust." 6 months later. The rain had finally stopped in Seattle, replaced by the pale, soft light of early spring. The cherry blossoms were blooming along the avenue where the new Hart Global warehouse now stood, built on a foundation that went down 70 feet into solid rock. Terrence sat in his office on the top floor of the tower. His name was on the door in gold letters: Terrence Williams, Director of Operations.
He adjusted his tie in the reflection of the window. It was a silk tie, not a clip-on. He looked healthy. The hollows in his cheeks were gone. His shoulders were broad and strong. His phone buzzed. It was a text from Lila. "Dad, I got an A on my science project. The bridge model held 50 pounds. Terrence smiled, a genuine, deep smile that reached his eyes. He typed back, "That's my girl. We're going for pizza tonight to celebrate. Extra pepperoni." There was a knock on the door. Vivian walked in. She looked different too, less stressed, softer. She was holding 2 coffees. "I just got the quarterly reports. Since you took over safety protocols, our insurance premiums have dropped by 40%. The board is thrilled." "Safety pays," Terrence said, taking a sip. Vivian sat on the edge of his desk. "You know, I still think about that day in the lobby, when you returned the wallet. It feels like a lifetime ago," Terrence admitted. "I asked you once why you did it. You said it was to teach Lila a lesson. Do you think she learned it?" Terrence looked at the photo on his desk. It was a new picture of Lila, standing in front of her private school, beaming with pride. "She did. But I think I learned something too." "What's that?" "That your value isn't in your pocket," Terrence said, tapping his chest over his heart. "It's in what you're willing to walk away from. I could have taken that $3,000 and survived for a month, but by walking away from it, I built a life."
Vivian smiled. "You built more than a life, Terrence. You built a legacy." She stood up to leave. "Don't stay too late. You have a pizza date." Terrence watched her go. He turned back to the window, looking out over the city. The sun was setting, painting the sky in hues of purple and gold. He reached into his drawer and pulled out an old, crumpled piece of paper. It was the flyer Lila had been drawing on that day in the rain. On the back, in wobbly crayon, she had drawn a picture of him holding an umbrella over her head. He ran his thumb over the drawing. He had walked through the storm. He had faced the cold, the hunger, and the temptation, and he had come out the other side, not because he was lucky, but because he was good. Terrence put the drawing back, turned off the lights, and walked out of the office, heading home to the daughter who thought he was a hero long before he had a dime to his name. Sometimes the hardest walk you make is the one to return what isn't yours. Terrence proved that integrity isn't just about doing the right thing when people are watching. It's about who you are when you have nothing to lose. If this story touched your heart, please subscribe to True Black Tales. We share stories like this every week to remind us all that no matter how dark the storm gets, the sun always rises for those who stand tall. And tell me in the comments, have you ever been tested like Terrence? Would you have returned the wallet? Let's talk about it down below. Until next time, keep walking your path.